Hey guys, I'm back ready to finish up some of Luke's story. I'm always in the car because we're always driving to some kind of appointment or some type of doctor's office or something, which is pretty much what happens when you have a special needs baby. But that's why I do these car vlogs, because here I am driving my life away and I might as well do something with it. So anyway, I left you off that I didn't do the blood work for the GLUT1 deficiency syndrome. The nurse had told us that they already knew what was wrong with him. It was getting late in the day and we were going to probably have to try to sleep and get our results the next morning, which is what we did. We were able to get Luke to eat. He was still very, very tired from the sedation, so he actually ended up falling asleep pretty quickly that night. But I obviously couldn't sleep. If you ever slept in a hospital with your child, you know that there's like one chair or cot typically for both parents. So you have to kind of like take turns trying to sleep on a folding chair and trying to sleep on this extremely uncomfortable reclining situation. So no one's really sleeping. I'm freaking out. I remember watching, for whatever reason, Law and Order. The silly things that you remember on the day that's about to change your life. And I just remember TV was on the entire night that night, and I just kind of napped here and there. The next morning, as I said earlier, this is a teaching hospital, so picture the Grey's Anatomy style, that there's like 5 or 6 doctors outside of the rooms, and they discuss the patient, and they come in and they discuss the patient some more, and they ask some questions. That actually, in my experience, is very similar to Grey's Anatomy. I know there are a lot of things that are not, perfect with medical dramas, but that I've found, being in the hospital 7 separate times with Luke for days on end, that is pretty typical. They round in that fashion. Anyway, so there, instead of there being like 4 or 5, maybe 6 doctors outside of our room the next morning, I look outside and there's literally like 10 to 15 doctors. Like, there is a massive group. I remember looking out and thinking, oh my god, every doctor that is in the hospital is out there. Like, there was so many people standing outside of our room, and a couple of doctors would kind of like peek in because there's like a window, and they would kind of like look over and peek in at Luke and see him sleeping on the little hospital crib, which, side note, I hate those hospital cribs. And they look in and they go back to talking, and another doctor would kind of peek over and they go back to talking. They were out there talking for over an hour and a half. They were out there for 90 minutes. And the whole time my heart is beating out of my chest. I know they're going to come in. I know they have news. I know they have what my son has. I know that there's a diagnosis coming, and in my heart, I know that it's not a good diagnosis. I know that it's not like, oh, he's got a cold. Like, something's really wrong. Well, after 90 minutes of them out there talking, they disperse. They don't come in, which every time they come in, they didn't come in. They left. This was like 9 o'clock in the morning. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's just like a new meeting or something, whatever. So at this point, it's like 11:30 after they have talked outside our room for 100 years. And then it's 12:30, and then it's 1:30, and then it's 2:30, and I'm like freaking out. I'm like, when are we going to find out the results? I know they have them. This is torture. This is literally torture. No one's coming in. No one's saying anything to us. We haven't seen the nurse in hours. Like, I felt like we were like put on this like desert island and no one wanted to talk to us. Finally at like 2 o'clock, and I apologize. I know that nurses are truly the ones that run the show. My best friend is a nurse. I love nurses, and I still feel guilty of all the people that I should have yelled at. This poor nurse who I had never seen before was not the one to yell at, but my anxiety level was through the roof. I literally was shaking all day because I just needed to know. I go out there and I'm like, you need to find me a neurologist. What is going on? I'm screaming at this poor girl. I'm like, it has been hours. They were outside of our room for an hour and a half this morning. What is going on? Is anyone gonna talk to us? What? Like, and I'm freaking out. So she, like, obviously knowing that I'm losing my mind, she's like, okay, let me call and see what I can do. So she calls, and about 45 minutes later, the student comes in. The medical student comes in. Now, from my basic understanding of, like, doctor hierarchy, the medical student technically is not a doctor yet. She is still in medical school. She is still learning. She's not anything. She's a student in medical school. So she's, I'm sure, brilliant. I'm sure she's just not qualified to give any information out. So anyway, she comes in and I'm like, okay, what is going on? Like, why don't we have a diagnosis? Why has no one been in here? Like, does he not have gluten deficiency syndrome? Did they find something on the MRI? And she said, yes, they found something on the MRI. And I said, well, what is it? And she said, parts of his brain are a little bit small. I said, okay, well, do you know, like, what parts of his brain are a little bit small? And in her 21-year-old medical student self, she goes, I think it's the pons and the cerebellum, but I'm not 100% sure. And then she follows it up with, and this is my last day on neurology. I really wish I could have followed this case. It looks like it'd be interesting. Well, thank you. Thank you for telling me my son's case is interesting. Go about your business learning to be a doctor. So she leaves. The minute she leaves, what would any one of you do? Pull up my phone and I bring up Google and I type in small pons and cerebellum. The first thing that pops up is pontocerebellar hypoplasia. Now, when any new parent that I meet online has a child that's diagnosed with pontocerebellar hypoplasia, my first thing that I say is don't go on Google. Google is incredibly, number one, outdated. It is only more recently that we are able to narrow down exactly the different types between PCH, and every single kid writes their own story. And if you go and Google PCH or pontocerebellar hypoplasia, it's miserable. Now, mind you, I didn't have a doctor to talk to. I didn't have a nurse to talk to. I had some medical student who basically laid this in my lap. Now, for those of you who don't know what pontocerebellar hypoplasia is, pontocerebellar hypoplasia is the pons and the cerebellum of the brain are underdeveloped. So the pons is considered the primitive brain. The primitive brain meaning it even like monkeys kind of have a pons. Our ancestors have pons. And that controls your breathing, your digestion, temperature control of your body, all basic life functions that you don't think about, or most basic life functions that you don't even have to think about. You don't think about your heart beating. You don't think about taking a breath most of the time. You don't think about the food moving through your digestive system because the pons does that for you. And then the cerebellum is the coordination center of the brain. So that's coordinating my hand to go above my head, coordinating my hand to go into my mouth, coordinating walking, crawling, chewing, swallowing, things like that. And his were underdeveloped. And because PCH is considered a degenerative disease, a lot of things on Google basically said he'd be super lucky to make it to his first birthday, and most kids die in early childhood. So as you can imagine, we were absolutely devastated. I was hysterical crying. My husband's hysterical crying, and he keeps saying, you don't know that's what he has. You don't know that's what he has. I'm like, she literally just said that's what he has. And so finally the actual neurologist comes in. And he comes in and he says, can I sit down? And I said to him, no. And I'm hysterical. He's like, what's the matter? And I said, my son has pontocerebellar hypoplasia, doesn't he? And he said, where did you get that from? And I said, the medical student told us that he had parts of his brain that were a little bit small, and I asked her which ones, and she told me, and I Googled it, and that's what it said. And he was like, yeah, I've never seen this before. But he has the dragonfly pattern in his brain. So the brain looks like a dragonfly if you have pontocerebellar hypoplasia. That's why it's also the symbol for pontocerebellar hypoplasia. He basically printed out what I had already Googled and already read and said, some kids walk, some kids talk, some don't make it to their first birthday, most don't make it out of childhood. He probably has about 3 months to live since he's already exhibiting symptoms, and just take life day by day. My heart sank. I didn't even know what to do or what to say or how to handle it. At this point, I had just turned 25 years old. I owned a home. I was married. We had our perfect little baby. Everything in my life was absolutely perfect. Everything was perfect. And on this day, my life, my world just, the world stopped turning that day. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't stop crying. I actually told the doctor, I'm like, he can't be this broken. He's too little to be this broken. I also said, look at him, he's too cute to die. Don't let him die. Very, very ridiculous things like that. And then what do you have to do as soon as you get this type of news is you now have to tell your entire family who also loves that child as much as you do. You have to then tell your family who's been worried about him and has been praying for him and has been following his story on Facebook, because I've been updating Facebook of Luke being in the hospital, and you now have to tell all of these people that your baby is going to die. So I called my mom, and it was a little bit before 4 o'clock, and she gets out of work around 4 o'clock. And I called her and I said, you have to come to the hospital right now. And my voice was choking, and she's like, what's the matter? And I said, I can't tell you. You have to come to the hospital right now. You need to get here right now. Please come here, please. And she got there very, very quickly. And then I had to break the news to her. And then I had to break the news to everyone on Facebook, and to my dad, and to my sister, and my brother, and my mother-in-law, and my husband's sisters, and my grandmother, and all of these people who love my baby. I had to tell them, it's really bad. What he has is really, really bad. It was, to this day, that is the worst day of my entire life, was being diagnosed with that, and being told he probably wouldn't make any milestones, and being told that he may never smile, he may never look at me, he probably will never say, I love you, mommy, he probably will never go to kindergarten, he may never have a first birthday. And all of those things are rolling through your head, and you're just looking at your perfect little baby, your perfect little 3.5-month-old little boy that you wanted since as long as you can remember. And not knowing the future, and not knowing what the future is going to hold, and not knowing how long you have with him, and being told this person who you just met this baby that you just met and just fell in love with may not be here very long. It was the absolute worst day of my life. So I'll leave you guys here for now, and I'll follow up. I promise my videos will get happier. And for those who are following the story and don't actually know us, he's actually in the back seat right now, and he is almost 2, and he is a very smiley, happy boy. So don't get too upset. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.